My father gave my son a brick in a box with the words, "Beggars can't be choosers." That's when I finally snapped. For his birthday, my father gave my son a brick in a box instead of a phone, saying, "Beggars can't be choosers." The whole room erupted in laughter. At that moment, I realized, I will not be silent anymore. Everyone in the room gasped at what they heard. Hello, friends. How are you feeling today? Write in the comments which city you're from and how you found our channel. We're very interested to learn more about you. Thank you for your support. Every like, subscription, and comment is worth its weight in gold to us. And now, make yourselves comfortable. The most interesting part is ahead. Enjoy the show. My son Alex's birthday was always special. 8 is an age when a child is already expecting something significant, not just a cake and balloons. The table in our cramped apartment living room was groaning with food. My mother's famous meatballs, the potato salad I'd spent half the night dicing, and some fancy shrimp dip, especially for the guests. In the corner stood a cake, a bit lopsided, with 8 candles that Alex had picked out himself at the store. He sat at the head of the table, fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth. His eyes shone with anticipation. I had promised him a phone. Nothing extraordinary, just a simple one, but for an 8-year-old boy, it was the whole world. "Dad, is it really a phone?" he whispered when I winked at him from the kitchen. I just nodded, feeling my heart ache at his smile. The guests had already gathered. My mother with her ever-present shawl on her shoulders, my sister Lisa with her husband Andrew, who was always as silent as a spy, and, of course, my father. He entered last, as always, with the air of a man who knows everyone is waiting for his arrival. His blazer, despite the heat, was buttoned to the top. His gaze was as sharp as a hawk's. He loved moments like these, being the center of attention, holding a dramatic pause until everyone fell silent. I noticed Alex straighten up when my father sat down next to him. "Well, birthday boy, ready for your presents?" he boomed, and the room grew quiet. I felt a prickle of anxiety but brushed it aside. My father had always been loud, with jokes that not everyone appreciated. A box appeared on the table. White, glossy, with a logo like the ones on expensive phones from commercials. Alex froze. His hands trembled as he reached for it. "Is it real?" he breathed, his voice as thin as a thread. The guests smiled. Lisa even clapped her hands. I looked at my father, trying to catch his eye, but he just smirked, sipping iced tea from a tumbler. "Open it, champ, don't drag it out," he said. And there was something in his tone that made my stomach clench. I should have been wary, but I didn't have time. Alex tore off the ribbon, opened the lid, and the smile on his face vanished like a candle in the wind. Inside the box lay a brick. An ordinary, gray paving stone with rough edges, as if it had just been picked up from a construction site. Alex blinked, then blinked again, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. A silence hung in the room, and then my father burst out laughing. "Beggars can't be choosers," he tossed out, leaning back in his chair. Lisa snorted with laughter. Andrew chuckled into his glass. Even my mother hummed, shaking her head. And Alex. He just sat there, staring at that damned brick. His cheeks turned red, his shoulders slumped, but he didn't cry. My boy, he was always stronger than he seemed. I looked at him, and something inside me snapped. That look, that silence. I knew them all too well. It was the same way I used to look at my father when, as a child, he would jokingly call me a slacker for getting a B in math or force me to blush in front of the neighbors. "Come on, Alex, don't be upset, it's just a joke," Lisa said, patting him on the shoulder. But I could see her smile tremble, how she glanced at our father as if to check if she was laughing correctly. Andrew was silent, as always, but his eyes darted around the room, avoiding my gaze. My mother mumbled something about father's cheerful nature, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was looking at Alex, at his tightly pressed lips, at how he slowly pushed the box away as if it were burning his hands. And then I understood. This wasn't just a joke, this was my father, his eternal performance where he was the star and everyone else was just an extra who could be humiliated for a laugh. I exhaled, trying to keep myself in check, but a fire was already burning inside me. "Great idea, Dad," I said quietly, my voice like a taut string. He shrugged, still smirking. "Relax, son. A boy has to learn about life." I looked at Alex, who was now staring at the table, and felt something inside me break. All these years, I had been silent when my father hurt me with his jokes, when he compared me to the neighbor's kid, Victor, who was a real man. When he said I would never amount to anything, I endured it, thinking that's just how it was, that this was family. But now, looking at my son, I knew I couldn't be silent anymore. Not for myself, but for him. I slowly stood up, feeling the gazes of everyone in the room lock onto me. My father narrowed his eyes, as if expecting me to say something familiar. To swallow the insult, as always. But not this time. I stood in the middle of the room, feeling the blood pound in my temples. Everyone was silent, only my father was still chuckling, sipping his tea as if nothing had happened. Alex stared at the table, his fingers gripping the edge of the tablecloth, and I suddenly saw myself at his age, when my father loudly announced at my birthday party that I couldn't get straight A's because I was lazy. I had been silent then too, blushing, while the guests laughed, thinking it was just a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was his way of keeping everyone on a leash, of showing who was in charge. And now, he had turned on my son. "Well, son, are you going to whine?" My father finally set down his glass and looked at me with that same smirk that used to give me chills as a child. Lisa, my sister, immediately chimed in. "Come on, Steve, don't escalate things. It was just for a laugh." Her husband Andrew, as always, was silent, but I noticed him shift uncomfortably in his chair, as if he wanted to disappear. My mother started fidgeting with her shawl, muttering something about not fighting on a holiday, but I looked at them and understood. They all knew this wasn't just a joke. They saw how Alex's spirit had fallen, how he was trying not to cry, but no one said a word. And that was the worst part. "You know, Dad," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've always been a master of these performances. I remember when you gave me an empty Nintendo box for my 10th birthday. You said I didn't deserve it because I got a C on my history test." Everyone roared with laughter, and I couldn't sleep for a week. The room grew so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My father narrowed his eyes but didn't interrupt. And I stayed silent, I continued, because I thought that was how it was supposed to be, that you were teaching me about life. But now I look at Alex, and I feel sick. You humiliated my son. For what? So everyone could have a laugh, so you could feel powerful. My father leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You take everything too seriously. The boy is 8 years old. It's time he learned to take a joke. I felt something click inside me, as if someone had turned a key in a lock. A joke. I repeated, my voice growing harder. This isn't a joke, Dad. This is you. You always do this. You pick someone who can't fight back, and you strike. Alex is my child. He was waiting for a gift, and you gave him a brick and called him a beggar. And you think that's funny? Lisa jumped up, her cheeks flushed. Steve, stop it, you're ruining the party. Dad just wanted to lighten the mood. I turned to her, and she faltered, seeing my expression. Lighten the mood? I said. And what did you do, Lisa? You laughed along with him. You're always so righteous, always going on about family values. Where were they when my son was sitting with that damned brick? Andrew coughed but still didn't raise his eyes. My mother tried to intervene. Steve, don't. It's Alex's birthday. Let's just cut the cake. But I couldn't stop now. No, Mom, I said, looking her in the eyes. The cake can wait. I was silent my whole life when Dad said I wasn't a man because I didn't join the Marines like he did, when he compared me to your favorite son-in-law who always knows best. When he laughed at me in front of the neighbors because I didn't buy a fancier car, I put up with it. But this is my son, and I will not let him grow up with this. I turned to Alex, who was looking at me with wide-open eyes. Let's go, buddy, I said quietly and took his hand. We went outside, and I felt the fresh air hit my face. Alex was silent, just squeezing my hand tighter. I opened the trunk of my car and took out another box, the real one, with the phone I had bought for him. This is your present, I said, kneeling to be on his level. Because you're a good, kind boy, and no one, you hear me, no one has the right to make you think otherwise. His eyes glistened, but he just nodded and hugged me. I felt the lump in my throat grow larger, but I held it back. This was not the time. When we returned to the house, everyone was on edge. My father stared at the box in Alex's hands, his face darkening. What, decided to one-up your grandpa, he grumbled. I shook my head. No, Dad. I just decided to be a father. And then I pulled a folder from my pocket, the one I had been keeping just in case. And now let's talk about something else, I said, tossing the folder onto the table. About how you used Alex's social security number to open a credit card, and about how Lisa withdrew money from his college fund for her personal growth courses. The room became so quiet I could hear a fly buzzing against the window pane. Lisa turned pale, her lips trembling. Steve, what are you talking about? That's not true, she stammered, but her voice betrayed her. My father clenched his jaw but said nothing. My mother stared at the folder as if it were a bomb, and I felt the wall I had been building for years finally crumbling inside me. A wall of silence, of hope that my family would one day become real. I know everything, I said calmly. I have the statements, I have the records, and I'm not going to let this go. Beside me, Alex clutched the phone box tighter. And I knew, for his sake, I would see this through to the end. The folder lay on the table like a grenade with the pin pulled. Everyone was silent, only my mother was nervously fidgeting with the edge of her shawl, and Lisa was looking at me as if I had just set the house on fire. My father sat motionless, but I could see his fingers clenching into fists. He always did that when he felt he was losing control. Alex stood beside me, clutching the phone box to his chest, and I could feel his gaze on me. Not scared, but something new, as if he was seeing me this way for the first time. Steve, my mother finally stammered, her voice trembling. Don't. This is family. Let's just talk. But I shook my head. The time for talking is over. It ended the moment my son received a brick instead of a present. Talk. I said, looking at my father. All right, let's start with how you opened a credit card in Alex's name, an 8-year-old child's name. Dad, you used his information to cover your debts. I opened the folder and pulled out the first statement, a bank document with a card number, Alex's name, and my father's address. Here, I said, placing the sheet on the table. The limit is low, only $500. But you know what's funny? It's already maxed out and overdue, and it's not the only one. I pulled out another statement, then 3 more. All in my son's name, all with debts he never incurred. Lisa jumped up, her face as white as chalk. This is insane, she nearly shouted. You made this up to slander us. But I saw her eyes darting around, glancing at our father as if seeking support. Andrew, her husband, finally lifted his head, but instead of saying anything, he just stared at the statements. As if at a death sentence. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Steve, she whispered. It's a mistake. Your father couldn't have. He's a grandfather. I snorted, unable to help myself. A grandfather? The one who just called Alex a beggar. The one who spent my whole life teaching me that I never measured up to his great standards. No, Mom, this isn't a mistake. This is him. My father finally spoke. His voice was low, with that same steel note I heard in childhood when he scolded me for a broken cup or a C on my report card. You're crossing a line, son. This is a family matter. We don't air our dirty laundry. I looked him straight in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to look away. A family matter? I repeated. And when you took money from Alex's college fund? Was that a family matter too? I took out another document, a bank statement, where it was written in black and white that $2,000 had been withdrawn from the 529 education account I had opened for my son. Signed by Lisa. Explain, sister, I said, turning to her. What did the money go towards? Another one of your Find Your Inner Self retreats, or that trip to Cancun where you posted photos of yourself with a cocktail for Instagram? Lisa opened her mouth, but the words got stuck. She looked at Andrew, then at our father, but there was no help. Andrew, who usually remained silent as a fish, suddenly muttered, Lisa, did you really do that? She flinched as if slapped. It was temporary, she squeezed out. I was going to pay it back. It was for my business, for my project. I shook my head. For your project. And did it ever occur to you that this was Alex's money, that this was his future? I turned to the guests, who were sitting on pins and needles, not knowing where to look. You all saw it, I said. You laughed at the brick. And now what? Are you going to say this is normal, that it was all just a joke? The silence was so heavy it felt like the air in the room had turned to tar. Alex suddenly coughed quietly, and I looked at him. He wasn't crying, but his eyes were shining, and I knew he heard everything, understood everything. I put a hand on his shoulder, and he gave a slight nod, as if to say, Dad, I'm with you. It gave me strength. I turned back to my father. You know, I spent my whole life trying to please you, I said. I worked 2 jobs to pay off my mortgage. I started my own small business, even though you said I couldn't handle it. And you? You always found something to rub my nose in. And now you've started on my son. But this is the end. My father stood up, his face red with anger. You ungrateful brat, he snarled. I raised you. I gave you everything, and you dare to accuse me like this in front of everyone. I took a step toward him, feeling the anger boiling inside me, but my voice was as cold as ice. You gave me lessons, Dad. Lessons in how not to live, how not to treat the people you love. And I won't let Alex learn them. I turned to my mother, who could no longer hold back her tears. Mom, you always defended him, said he was strict but fair. But where is the fairness when he's stealing from Alex's future, when he makes a child feel worthless? My mother sobbed but didn't answer. Lisa tried to say something again, but I raised my hand. Enough, I said. I've already made my decision. I took out my phone and opened a photo, a screenshot of the bank transaction where Lisa withdrew the money from Alex's account. Here, I said, showing the screen. Is this you, Lisa? Smiling at the teller while you sign the papers. You said you had my permission, only I never signed anything. Andrew turned to her sharply, his face hardening. Lisa, is this true? He asked, and there was something new in his voice. As if he was seeing his wife without her mask for the first time. I gathered the documents back into the folder and looked at everyone. I could have stayed silent, I said. I could have swallowed it, like always. But not this time. Not for Alex's sake. I took my son's hand and headed for the door. My father shouted at my back, if you leave, don't come back. I stopped without turning around. You made that choice, Dad, when you decided it was okay to humiliate my son. We walked out, and the doors slammed behind us, like a period at the end of a long, ugly chapter. Outside, it was cool, smelling of rain, and Alex suddenly said, "Dad, you're awesome." I smiled, though the fire was still burning inside me. "You too, son," I replied. And we walked to the car, leaving behind that house full of lies and laughter at another's pain. Alex and I left the house, and the night greeted us with a cold wind. I could feel him shivering, either from the cold or from everything that had happened. "Dad," he said quietly as we walked to the car. "Are they always like that?" I stopped and looked at him. His eyes were serious, wise beyond his years. "Not always, buddy," I answered, trying to speak calmly. "But sometimes people, even family, can hurt you, and it's important not to let them." He nodded as if he understood more than I had said and climbed into the passenger seat. I got behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. I just sat there, looking at the dark windows of the house where the lights were still on, and thought, this is the end. Not just an argument, not just hurt feelings. The end of a whole life where I tried to be a good son to people who didn't appreciate it. The next day, my phone was ringing off the hook. First, my mother called. Her voice trembled as if she had been crying all night. "Steve, how could you?" she began. "Dad didn't sleep. Lisa is hysterical. You know he didn't mean any harm. It was a joke." I listened, gripping the phone, and felt the old anger rising again. "Mom," I interrupted. "A joke is when everyone laughs. When a child is sitting with a brick in his hands, blushing with shame, that's not a joke, it's cruelty." She fell silent. I could only hear her sniffling. "You were always stubborn," she finally said. "But you don't treat family this way." I scoffed. Family? And where was this family when Dad was taking out credit cards in Alex's name? Where were you when Lisa was draining money from his account? She started muttering something about a misunderstanding, but I ended the call. Enough. Then Lisa texted, a long message full of accusations. "You destroyed the family, Steve. You made us all out to be monsters. I was going to return the money. It was a one-time thing. How could you do this to us?" I read it and didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the bank. Alex's education account, which I had started saving for when he was born, was nearly empty. That $2,000, which I had saved for years, had gone to Lisa's project, some retreat where she was learning to be in harmony with herself. The teller, a young man with tired eyes, confirmed it. Lisa came in, smiling, and showed a forged permission slip with my signature. "She said you were aware of it," he added guiltily. I just nodded. I was boiling inside, but I knew emotions wouldn't help now. I needed facts. I gathered all the documents, statements for the credit cards issued to Alex, bank records of Lisa's withdrawals, even the security camera footage from the bank showing her cheerfully filling out the paperwork. And the video from the birthday party. I had asked one of the guests, a cousin who was filming the celebration on his phone, to send me the recording. It was all there. My father handing over the box, Alex opening it, the sound of that phrase about beggars, everyone laughing. I watched the video at home, and every chuckle on the recording was like a knife, but I knew it was my trump card. A week later, I filed a police report. Fraud, forgery of documents, identity theft of a minor. I laid out everything I had. The detective, a woman in her 50s with a short haircut and a stern gaze, leafed through the documents, shaking her head. "So, your father," she said, "and your sister. What is this, some kind of family business?" I couldn't help but smile grimly. "More like a family tradition," I replied. She looked at me with something resembling sympathy. "We'll sort it out, but be prepared, this won't be quick." At home, I tried to keep things normal. Alex went to school, did his homework, and even started smiling more often. I signed him up for karate classes. He had been asking for a long time, and I had kept putting it off. In the evenings, we would sit on the couch, eat popcorn, and watch old comedies, like Home Alone and Ghostbusters. He would roar with laughter at the lines I had known by heart since my own childhood, and I felt the tension that had weighed on me for years slowly begin to fade. But the shadows of the past didn't disappear. My mother called every day, sometimes begging me not to disgrace the family, other times telling me how distraught my father was after our fight. Lisa sent another message. "Do you even realize what you're doing? Dad is sick, he has a heart condition. This will be on your conscience." I didn't reply. Let them say what they wanted. I knew I was right. 2 weeks later, a letter came from the bank. They had frozen the credit cards opened in Alex's name and had begun an internal investigation. The detective called and said the case was moving forward. Lisa's signature on the documents was confirmed as a forgery, and my father couldn't explain why his address was listed on the credit applications. "Your old man is a master at dodging," she chuckled. "But facts are facts." I thanked her and hung up, feeling a strange sense of relief. Not joy, just a feeling that the truth was finally coming out. But the family didn't give up. One evening, while Alex and I were making pancakes, she insisted I teach him how to flip them in the pan. Me Aunt Nina, my mother's sister who had always kept her distance, called. "Steve," she said quietly. "I understand you're angry, but think about your mother. She's not sleeping, she's crying. Your father is in the hospital, his blood pressure is through the roof. Maybe you could talk." I exhaled, looking at Alex, who was concentrating on pouring the batter. "Aunt Nina," I replied. "They humiliated my son and used him as a wallet. I can't forgive that." She was silent for a moment, then said, "You're right, of course, but family is family." I ended the call and went back to Alex. "Dad, the pancake is burning," he said, and we both burst out laughing. That laughter was purer than anything I had heard at that birthday party. And then the trial began. It was scheduled for early summer. And I knew it wouldn't just be a legal proceeding, it would be the end of everything that tied me to them. I hired a lawyer, Sarah, a woman with an iron will and a gaze that made you want to stand at attention. She reviewed the documents and nodded. "The case is solid. They don't stand a chance." I didn't want revenge, but I wanted the truth to be spoken aloud. So that Alex would know his father would not let anyone trample on his dignity. On the day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom, holding the folder of evidence, and I saw them. My father in his best blazer, my mother with red-rimmed eyes, Lisa nervously clutching her purse. They thought I would back down, but I looked at Alex, who was waiting for me at home, and knew there was no retreat. The courtroom was stuffy, despite the open windows. Summer had just begun, but the heat was already oppressive, like in an old, stuffy apartment building without air conditioning. I sat on a wooden bench, clutching the folder of documents, and looked at my father. He was still trying to maintain his composure. His blazer was pressed, his chin held high, but his eyes betrayed him. He knew he had lost. My mother sat beside him, fidgeting with her shawl. Her face was as pale as chalk. Lisa, on the other hand, looked ready for a fight. Her eyes burned, her lips were pressed into a thin line. Andrew, her husband, for the first time in all these years, didn't look like a mere observer. He looked at Lisa with a new, cold disappointment. And I just wanted it to be over. Not for revenge, but for Alex, so he would know that the truth always wins, even when it hurts. The judge, an elderly woman with a weary gaze, leafed through our documents. Sarah, my lawyer, stood beside me, as calm as a tank. She started with the main point, showing the statements for the credit cards opened in Alex's name. "Here," she said, pointing to my father's signature. 3 credit cards, opened in the name of an 8-year-old child. Total debt, over $2,500. All applications were filled out from the defendant's home address. My father tried to say something, but the judge raised her hand. "Wait," she said dryly. "We're not finished yet. Sarah took out the next folder. And this, she continued, is a statement from Alexander's 529 college fund. $2,000 were withdrawn without the consent of his father, Steve. The signature was forged by the defendant, Lisa. Lisa shot up. "That's a lie," she shouted. "I was going to pay it back." The judge looked at her over her glasses. "Please sit down." Then they played the video from the birthday party. I couldn't watch it myself. Every frame was like a punch. Alex opening the box, his face when he sees the brick, my father's laughter, the phrase, "Beggars can't be choosers." A silence fell over the courtroom, broken only by my mother's quiet sobs. Even the judge frowned, as if she herself was unsettled. "It was a joke," my father muttered when he was called to the stand. "I didn't mean any harm." But his voice trembled, and I saw him avoid looking at me. Sarah presented another piece of evidence, a recording of a conversation with Lisa where she admitted to taking the money for her project. "I thought Steve wouldn't find out," she had said then, not knowing I was recording. Andrew, sitting next to her, lowered his head, and I knew their marriage was also cracking at the seams. On the third day of the trial, the bank teller gave his testimony. "Yes, I remember her," he said, pointing at Lisa. "She was cheerful, joking, said her brother was aware of it." Lisa tried to object, but the judge wasn't listening anymore. The facts spoke for themselves. When it was my father's turn, he tried to wriggle out of it. "I didn't know it was illegal. I thought it was okay for family." But Sarah was ruthless. She showed his signatures on the credit applications, his phone number used for verification. "You knew what you were doing," she said. "And you've been doing it for years." My father fell silent, and I saw his shoulders slump. For the first time, he didn't look like the master of his universe, but simply an old man.